Welcome to another episode of the Mahoney Advanced Training Podcast. We have an awesome episode today because it's hitting a topic near and dear to a lot of our people's hearts, and it's about pain. And we have someone on the line who I've had a couple of conversations with, Eileen Kopsaftis, and she's going to help us talk about pain and maybe ways to cure our pain because a lot of our audience is too young to feel as old as they feel. Eileen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, George. And even the older audience is too young to feel how they feel because it's not age related. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I love it. I love it. So my first question for you, as I was peeking through your website, you had these words: your passion is to erase pain for the world, and that you love to help people get their life back.
Mm-hmm.
That is beautiful. How did that become your passion?
I think it's just kind of in my DNA. Ever since I was little, I've always wanted to help people I don't know, I can't even take credit for it. It's just kind of like my raison d'etre, my reason for being. I've just always been drawn to people who were considered the underdog, people who were struggling, the person who had no friends. I've just always been wanting to help people and improve their life. And obviously when it comes to pain, it's everywhere. So I'm busy.
Do people come to you and say, I need my life back? Are those actually the words? Because those are words that I feel sometimes when I'm trying to tie my shoe and I can't, or I'm waking up in pain. Do they come to you and say that?
Yes. They want their life back. Absolutely. Yes.
So next question for you. We kicked it off where I said, we're too young to feel this old. And then you were saying, well, even older people shouldn't feel that old. What does it mean for you when you say that people should age well?
Well, I'm, a bit less than 3 years from 70. So I don't have chronic pain. I don't have movement problems. I teach movement. And I know a lot of the times, and I have a very dear friend who's in the fitness industry who said one of the dirty little secrets of the fitness industry is that most fitness instructors are in chronic pain. And so,
Guilty.
yeah. So I think that the biggest problem is that we've been fed this narrative that pain is normal. Now it might be common, but it's not normal. It's a physiological abnormality of the human body, whether it's from, and I did watch your video on pain. It was very well done, by the way. I was impressed with all the work you did. But, whether it's neurological, whether it's biomechanical, whether it's systemic, it's still an abnormality. So even though it's common, it doesn't mean it's normal. And I think as we age, we're told we're supposed to have pain as we get older. And it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy, you are getting older, well, you are, 72, well, what do you expect? I mean, they even get that in the medical offices. What do you expect at your age? And so it just becomes this thing where we think it's inevitable. And so a lot of people don't even really do anything about it except for maybe take over-the-counter pain relievers because they think, well, it's part of getting older. I mean, I had a conversation with a guy who was 35 and he said that his friends told him when he turned 30, it was all downhill from there. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? So this is the world we live in. This is the mainstream narrative. And we've got to learn to reject that because it's not true. It's a lie from the pit of hell. It's not true.
So you're saying that you're at 67 years old, you have no chronic pain, you don't wake up feeling like all your bones are broken, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jealous.
And I have a lot of people in my academy who are older than me who do not have chronic pain.
So tell us a little bit about your academy. What do you do? And how do you help these people age well?
Well, half the people who come to me want to get out of pain. The other half don't want to end up in a nursing home. Now, of course, wanting to age well, oftentimes there are some pain components to that. And so I've got two different contents that I offer to people. The academy happens to be for people who want to age well. And so I've got people, average age is 60-ish. There's people in their 70s and 80s. I have one woman who's 80, I think 86. And she lives in an apartment building. She's got a health history. she's battled some serious stuff like cancer and other things. She walks up 13 to 14 flights of stairs every single day to stay in shape. So, and because of some respiratory limitations, she takes a break here and there, but she does those flights of stairs. She doesn't, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody listening. She doesn't use age as an excuse. I had a guy come to me, he was in his mid 80s. Well, actually his wife brought him in, and he's sitting in there in the chair, and she's standing next to him, and she's explaining to me, yeah, well, the doctor wanted me to bring him here because he used to walk to the corner store every morning, and he was pretty active, and he kind of stopped doing all that. And now I got to help him get out of the chair. He can't even get out of the chair without my help. And he looks up at me and he goes, don't you think at my age I should be allowed to rest? And I just looked back and said, well, if you want your wife to dust you off once a day. I mean, I didn't know how else to respond to that, because, okay, are you saying you just want to sit there until you're dead? I mean, it's motion's lotion. We have to move. The human body's designed for movement. If you don't move, you're going to get stiff. You're going to hurt. You're going to struggle. You're going to get weak. You're going to lose energy. I mean, we need to be moving. And so, but we have to be moving the right way and not causing problems. But here's the rub. That guy in 2 or 3 weeks, he was leg pressing over 200 pounds and getting out of the chair like a shot. And he was in his mid 80s.
In 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks. So the thing is, the human body is designed on a cellular level to respond to whatever we do. It's really not designed to decline on a cellular level. I've studied aging, and I'm a data girl, and I could make everybody's eyes glaze over talking about cellular senescence and all this other nonsense. But the bottom line is, there is not one expert on the planet who really understands why we age. Nobody knows why it happens. So we can spend the rest of the eons we're on this planet to figure that out, or we can just focus on what keeps us well. And I've had the opportunity to observe that in 30 plus years of what I do. I've observed a lot of people over 100 years old getting stronger. I've observed a lot of people over 100 years old living an independent life, not in chronic pain, driving, shopping, cooking, cleaning, doing their own finances, having a social life. So why is it we think we're supposed to decline? Why? Because we've been told?
We've been told. Yeah, we've absolutely been told.
But it's a lie. It's not true. But as long as we believe it's true, we're going to fall into those traps. We're going to make choices and life decisions that will cause it to be true.
So you had said you listened to that pain podcast, and let's dive into that a little bit, because I want to make sure that I'm right. I could have been completely and totally wrong. And a big portion of that pain podcast, at least the beginning, was that a lot of it could be just mental and in your head. What do you think of that? Completely off, or is there any validity to that comment?
No, there's a lot of people who have shown that to be very valid. Dr. John Sarno is somewhat, I don't know if you've ever read any of his work, but he was very well known for he named it tension myositis syndrome, TMS. And what to kind of just paraphrase and put it really simple, he said what can happen is when someone has something that doesn't make sense and nobody can figure out why they're experiencing it, whether it's chronic pain or some kind of a health issue that's, none of the tests or anything is showing why. He said a lot of the times it's something that the person is struggling with emotionally or mentally that's not acceptable. And so the body puts all that into something that is acceptable. And so my best way of explaining that is, say a woman loses her husband and she's mad as heck that he died. She can't tell her friends she's mad at her husband for dying. That's not acceptable. But if she ends up with chronic back pain, that's acceptable. And so the cool thing about his work is he's written several books. And I think it's like, from the data that he presented, like 90-something% of the people who read the books, when they figured out there was something that they were like suppressing and not dealing with, they were able to resolve it and get better.
Tell me more about this. Is the back pain a symptom of repressing those feelings? Or is it like, well, I got to do something to have some feelings, so I'm just going to feel this back pain?
Right. So I can't really explain it in technical detail because that was his work, his body of work, and I didn't study it to the point where I could teach it. I mean, I recommend people to read his books because they're really, really well written and they explain very, very well. And he did have a clinic where people would go. And there are some people who've taken on his work. Dr. Jonathan Kuttner, Kuttner from New Zealand, wrote a book. I think it's called You Pain Free. He changed the title, and for some reason I've struggled to remember the new title. But he kind of carried on John Sonner's work and put some of that in his book. But this is not to say that every time we feel pain, it's because of emotional suppression. I mean, that would not be accurate. There are times we feel pain because we're injured. There are times we feel pain because there's a mechanical issue going on. Things aren't working the way they're designed to work, and tissues and structures are getting irritated and inflamed and annoyed because, it's kind of like a system of ropes and pulleys. And if you shift things and the rope starts to get worn, it's going to snap because the mechanics are off. Human body is very similar to that. So there's a lot of other reasons. Chronic inflammation, systemic inflammation is a huge reason for pain. I've had people who changed how they fed themselves, and in 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of their joint pain was gone. Their chronic migraines were gone. So there's other reasons for pain. It's not all suppressed emotions. But
Okay. So you're
for
saying,
people who've tried everything, which I always kind of joke and say there's no way you've tried everything because there's too many things on the planet to try. But unfortunately, you haven't tried what works for you. So,
but you're saying that not all pain is from suppressed emotions,
yeah.
but suppressed emotions could cause pain.
Good. Yes.
Okay. All right. You hit on a couple things there, and I got a bunch of questions, and I'm thinking about the best way to go through it. Maybe I'm going to go to the question I have about your book called Aging Culprits.
Mm-hmm.
12 myths that sabotage your future and steal your joy. What is the one myth that our audience absolutely needs to know?
Well, probably the one that we first talked about, mindset, belief. If you believe you're supposed to decline, you will. If you believe you're supposed to lose your independence and need disposable underwear and end up having somebody help you with hygiene while you're toileting, or use an assistive device to get from point A to point B, if you believe that's supposed to happen as you get older, then you're probably right. Because you're not going to do anything to prevent it. You just kind of expect it and accept it. And so it's really, the first chapter in my book is all about that mindset, belief systems. I've got these 3 questions I ask in that chapter that I think are very important for people to ask. The first one is, where are you? And I don't mean like your address. I mean, figure out where you are as far as your health status, as far as your physical status, your pain status. You got to know your starting point. And then, there's this thing about, who have you been listening to? I mean, have you been reading magazine articles and newspaper articles or online and listening to all the AI nonsense and junk that's out there? Because I can tell you there's more AI stuff out there than people have a clue about. They don't even have a clue how bad the AI stuff is out there. And as a matter of fact, I just did one of my Friday Value videos on a study that came out that said that people are going to they're using the, what's it called? Multi-language learning system, MLL or whatever it's called, but that's AI. I think it's like once a month. 3 out of 10 people are using it every month for health advice. And what they found in this study, and they did a study of like 1,200 people or something, that AI could be dead wrong to the point where if somebody had an aneurysm, one of the AI's advice was to go lay down in a dark room. The other one said, go to an emergency room. Now, what if you were the one that it told you to lay down in a dark room? You're dead. So we really can't, we got to be careful. You got to make sure that the person you're seeking for advice is live and they have experience and they're good at what they do. The simple question is, how long has somebody been doing what they do and how many people have they helped? Doesn't matter how many letters after their name, how many books they've written. How long have they been doing it and how many people have they helped? Because there's a lot of best-selling books out there written by healthcare professionals who aren't actually practicing medicine or working with patients. Everything they write is kind of theoretical and they can't even tell you how it works in a patient population. So,
all right. So,
yeah, I know lots of stuff to unpack, right?
I'm guilty right now. And this is just, the timing is crazy because last night I'm like, let me go into ChatGPT and I'm going to ask them what I should do for my hip. So let me give the audience a little bit of a background here. I have a real hard time tying my left shoe. I cannot, I believe I'll call it internally to rotate my hip, where I cannot bring my left foot to my left knee. It's like, I don't know if it's mental, I don't know if it's physical, but I would love to be like sedated one day and see if the doctor can just like move my leg without any problem with my brain not involved. So I was doing research, and Eileen, I want you to tell me if I'm wrong about any of this. And I was thinking, oh my God, maybe my right lat is so tight and so banged up that maybe that muscle or that fascia crosses across my body, and that is what is impinging or causing the impingement in my left hip. So I was asking ChatGPT, could pain in my right lower lat cause impingement of my left hip, cause issues with my left adductor? And it said, yes, you can. And then it gave me, yes, it can. And then it gave me a prescription on what I should do to loosen it up before I actually go and try and tie my shoe. So is ChatGPT way off here, or is it even remotely close?
So, well, you gave it a leading question. So all it had to do was say yes or no. And it didn't think to ask you any other question about yourself, right?
It did not.
Didn't ask you if you had any history, didn't ask you, have you had that hip x-ray? Do you have an FAI? Do you have this? Do you have that? It didn't ask you anything, but it gave you advice that depending on your history, that advice could be harmful versus helpful. So that's why I'm saying this. It doesn't know to ask the right questions. And people don't always know to give it the right information because people aren't medical experts. If you're talking with somebody who's an expert in a field and they know what they're talking about, they're going to ask you a lot of questions. So now, is it possible that that tension, you got your thoracolumbar fascia, which is like an X, it comes up into the latissimus dorsi, it goes down into the glutes and the erector spinae. Yeah, there's a lot of fascia there. And that fascia, if it's not hydrated, if it's not fluid, if it's compressed and dehydrated, it can limit motion pretty much anywhere in the body. I mean, if you look at a tensegrity model, I could have a limitation here in my fascia and have a restriction in my right knee because it's all connected. It's one system. So absolutely, yes, it could be true. But the AI didn't know enough to ask you any other questions. So potential harm could be done. And I'm only saying that because of your audience.
And I think I'm thinking about all the smart people I know. So we have Dr. Rob Milianica, Dr. Mike Fina, friends of mine. None of you will ever just say, oh, there's your problem, here's a solution. There's always really good questions, probing questions, seek to understand. I don't want to do, even the first time you and I spoke, I said, listen, can you help me out? You're like, I don't want to do any harm. Let's talk this through. There was a lot of good questions. So for somebody using AI, is it only as good as the prompts they put in? And what I just took an AI boot camp, it was about reverse prompting, where you started to train AI to ask you the right questions so that it can be a little more intelligent. So is it really only as good as the prompts that are going back and forth between you and AI?
Well, yeah, and it still does some glitches. Like there were a couple of reports that said that it glommed onto a term that had nothing to do with the actual topic at hand, like Saudi Arabia and some other thing. One time it gave advice to call an 800 number, but it only gave the partial number. And then it gave advice to call 000, which I guess is Australia's emergency number. So that's not going to help somebody here in the US. So there's a lot of glitches. And I think the reason they're trying to use it is because AI can pass the medical boards. Of course it can. It's a computer. You give the computer all the information, it's going to give you all the right answers. But that doesn't mean it knows how to diagnose accurately. That doesn't mean it knows how to question appropriately. And people are not medical experts. So there's going to be some very important information that they're not even going to know is good to share. So there's the rub. I mean, if somebody comes to me with knee pain, I want to know their history of any ankle injuries, because that's huge. If the ankle's not functioning properly, the knee is going to be a victim, or the hip. If that's not proper, the knee is going to be a victim. Low back is dependent on the hips below and the trunk above. AI isn't going to know to ask any of those questions.
Right.
AI isn't going to ask you to move and observe you. So we're asking something that does not have the ability to do what a human being does when it comes to diagnosing and assessing a human condition.
You could be upsetting a lot of AI people here right now, Eileen, but something tells me you don't care that much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move to...
I'm Canadian. Sorry, not sorry.
So what are your thoughts on, and this is really, it really hits on the last topic, because you were saying the ankle might be involved with the knee. What are your thoughts on medicating, I like that term that you use, symptoms as opposed to eliminating the root cause of the problem?
Yeah, so I used to tell people before they come into the clinic not to take pain med. And I know that's the opposite of what a lot of people in my profession do. They tell them, take some pain med because you're going to do some stuff. It's going to cause some pain. And to me, it's okay. If we're causing pain to try to resolve a pain issue, we're doing something wrong. So I don't want you medicated, medically manipulated, so that you can't experience pain when you use a body part that is not aligned properly or not mechanically sound. Because now we're doing more harm than good. And when somebody goes and gets, say, a steroid injection, that's medical manipulation. They're medically manipulating the inflammatory response. And so now that person uses that joint, like the shoulder, there's, if the injection worked, which a lot of people, they don't, but if it worked and the pain has subsided substantially, they're going to use that shoulder like, oh, I'm all good now, but mechanically it's still off. Mechanically, the latissimus dorsi is still depressing the humeral head. And every time they lift it, it's out of alignment. So mechanically, it's still causing structural damage to the body, but the person doesn't feel it. So that injection really wasn't helpful, was it? So or medications, same thing. So
is it also temporary? Like it's not making the root cause of the problem go away. You're just going to keep...
It's not addressing the cause. It's treating the symptom. Yes.
Because I was kind of thinking, if say the pill actually didn't do much, but it took away the mental side of it, right? Maybe it's all in your head. But are you going to always then rely on this pill, even if it's doing nothing?
Well, there is the placebo effect.
Right.
There's also the nocebo effect.
Tell me, what is the nocebo?
If you believe something is going to give you more like problems, if you believe something's going to harm you when you take it, but it can't because it's an inert substance. If you're in a study and you think, oh, this is probably going to make me sick, and it makes you sick, but it was an inert subject and it couldn't harm you, then that's the nocebo effect. So there's the opposite. There's placebo and nocebo. And the placebo effect is a lot more profound than people think. So, and sometimes we get caught up in things. I have a family member who had a chronic health issue, which was recovered from, but was taking daily NSAIDs, thinking they were necessary, which of course trashed her GI system. So she had to stop taking them to heal. And she realized she didn't have any joint pain when she stopped taking them, which meant she probably could have stopped taking them a long time ago.
Now,
so, yeah.
Were you thinking of becoming a doctor, and this type of thing pushed you away from trying to be a doctor?
Well, when I was little, I did want to become a doctor, but then when I got old enough to go to med school, I wasn't. This is absolutely no disrespect to doctors, because they are some of the best people on the planet. Anybody who goes to school for 12 years to help people is a good person. I just didn't agree with the medical model in this country. Maybe if I was in a different country, I wouldn't, but I didn't agree with the medical model, treating the symptoms, medicating. And a lot of physicians that I know have stepped away from that traditional role and are working much more, dietary, holistic, that kind of thing, because watching people just collect more and more meds as they get older isn't very fulfilling in a profession. So, yeah.
So I got to go back to that nocebo effect. I'm going back to the pain podcast. And this is probably an impossible question to answer, but say I'm going to tie my shoe and I can't. Is there a possibility that I actually can, but my brain is just saying, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to get hurt. Just stop. Don't keep moving.
Yeah, there's something, and that's in Jonathan Kuttner's work. He talks about pain patterns. And what happens is, and he talks about this from his own experience, because he was very physically fit and active. And he was a primary care physician who became a pain expert after his own injury. He was hang gliding and he slammed into the side of a mountain. So he had some issues, some injuries. And he said that, he had some pretty severe back pain, that for some reason he could work all day in the office and get through it. But, when he was home, it was worse, which is kind of funny because, so that says right there's some mental component to it because he'd had time to heal. And he said that he had a morning where when he went to get out of bed, he thought he was going to die. The pain was so severe. So then the next morning, when he went to get out of bed, his brain told him, oh, we're going to get that pain that we got when we went to, and he did. And he realized the brain had created a pain pattern that whenever I get out of bed, I'm going to have that pain. And he learned to use some strategies. And his book is very good at explaining all that. I won't even try. I'm not the author. But he learned to resolve that pain pattern because it was the brain telling him something was going to happen, but it wasn't accurate. It was based on experience, not necessarily current situation.
Sounds about right. So I want to use me as like a patient here. And I know we can't answer all the questions to the test because I'm not right in front of you, but you were talking about that X before. And just to give some of our viewers like a first time insight into what is going on in the world of George Mahoney and his pain. So one is, can't tie my shoe. I can actually tie my shoe, to be honest. It's putting my sock on that's really the hard part. I've recently got enough mobilization to be able to tie my shoe pain-free, but it's putting the sock on that is absolutely a problem. And also, by the way, I've been working on a lot of things to like separate my toes. So now the wider my foot gets, even harder it is to put the sock on. But so I have that issue of that impingement. And then also in my left lat, I guess that's where the issue is, where if I'm carrying something heavy, I'll just lose all feeling and I'll just limp. I'll noticeably limp or like lose all my strength in my left side. But can you tell me a little bit about that X? Where is there a possibility that something on the right side of my body is impacting the left side of my body?
Absolutely. And I know you're going to like this because you mentioned this in your pain video, that treating the opposite side can very often alleviate symptoms. And there's a lot to that. There's, our brain has two hemispheres and we've got this corpus callosum in the center where things cross over. And anybody listening to this knows if somebody has a stroke in the right side of their head, the left side of their body is impacted and vice versa. So there is this crossover that occurs. And I've worked with people who had phantom limb pain, who had, an amputation. And you treat the limb that's there and it alleviates the pain in the limb that's not there. So there is this crossover that occurs. Now, Tom DeLonzo Baker, who's a brilliant man, he teaches something called total motion release. And what he has learned, and he has taught this now for, oh my gosh, I don't even know how long, more than 15 years, that the body has more than one opposite. So we always think of, okay, the opposite of the right leg is the left leg. But that's only if you divide the body halfway this way. But if you divide the body in half crosswise, the opposite of the right leg is the right shoulder.
Oh, God.
If you divide the body diagonal, the opposite of the right leg is the left shoulder. So what he has learned is there's these, he kind of teaches it sort of simplistic initially for people who are just trying to learn this. And he just teaches you 6 simple movements to assess in your body, right side, left side. And then the ones that get the highest score are the ones that you treat by doing work to the yummy side. to fix the yucky side, even if it's not painful. But say, all right, I'll give an example so people aren't confused by what I'm saying. So say you've got left hip pain, okay?
I do.
And right, and say you do an arm press against a doorway, right arm, left arm, and say left arm feels awkward, like you can't really go as far, you feel maybe a little twinge at the end, it's just not quite as good. Now in the TMR world, you score from 0 to 100 because you're scoring the quality of the motion, not just the 0 to 10 pain scale. So usually if it's a minimal difference, the score would be anywhere between a 5 and a 30. So say you say, well, it's minimal, maybe it's a 20. Well, and the other side is perfect. You can go all the way. There's no problem. It feels fabulous. You could do 100 reps with no problem. So what you would do is you would do a couple of sets of maybe 15, 20 reps on the yummy side, and then reassess the yucky side and see if the score changed. And if it did, say it went from a 20 to a 10, that means it got improved by 50%. You repeat it because whatever work, if it works, you do it again. So you do 2 more sets on the yummy side. And this is all just an example. Say you do the yucky side again, and now it's a 0. You feel like, oh my gosh, they're like pretty much the same. I don't feel any difference at all. Then you test that left hip again and see if restoring symmetry here didn't improve hip function. Now, I've used this for people who've had total joint replacements. I've used this for people who've had strokes. I've used this for people who've had chronic pain, serious injuries like hamstring strains. And I've seen this work. I've seen this improve range of motion, improve strength, and improve pain by working the opposites. So it's very cool.
Now I'm baffled. By the way, I believe in working the opposites. I truly do, because I've actually experimented on me. I consider myself a human guinea pig. But now you got me baffled of that it might not be the other exact, like it's not right leg.
Right. Like if it's left shoulder, you think you got to work the right shoulder. Not necessarily.
I'm going to digress.
A lot of times just working the trunk, which doesn't really have a right and a left, but obviously you can rotate left, you can rotate right, you can side bend, so you can do right and left motions with the trunk. A lot of the times, if you test the trunk and you notice there's a big asymmetry between the 2 motions, resetting the symmetry in the trunk can help shoulders, hips, like almost neck, like almost anywhere in the body. It's really kind of
why is that? Works. Is it because the trunk is the main transfer area between your extremities?
There's theory as to how it works. There's been a lot of data that supports this type of thing for the past, 70 years. But I think, to me, theoretically, what you're doing is it's almost like a strain and counter strain strategy. Strain and counter strain is when you shorten a muscle to kind of put it on slack and relax it. And then once it's relaxed, it will allow lengthening. So what I see it, and this is just my own professional observation, what I see it is, if say I can rotate to the left really, really well, but when I rotate to the right, say I feel a restriction. Well, that says there's something that's not wanting to lengthen to allow me to do that. But if I rotate this way, whatever it is that doesn't want to get longer is actually getting shorter and kind of being put on slack. So it sort of releases and relaxes. And so now that's just, one potential theory. I'm trained in strain and counter strain through the Jones Institute, but that's a whole nother topic. But it's can be very, very effective. Yeah.
So, and I'm even thinking when I went to Dr. Rob, he's our guru that we go to. All the athletes we train go to him, and the very first thing he had me do was stand with my arms across my body and try and rotate around and see how far I can go. And it wasn't far at all, by the way. It was actually pretty pathetic. But after he would have me retest that after every single set of movements he put me through. Mm-hmm. And as I was going through things, I'm thinking, I'm wondering if any of the tests he had me doing were actually the things that were helping me heal, or was it up here? I don't know, but I felt considerably better walking out of it.
The Gray Institute is famous for saying the test is the exercise and the exercise is the test.
I like that. The test is the exercise. So something, now that I'm thinking about what you said, I saw, look, and this is the other danger to everyone who's listening. There's a million things on Instagram. By the way, because I've looked up hip pain on Instagram, that's the only thing in my feed right now is 100 different people, 100 different experts, all with a different answer of how you can get this hip/lower back pain away. But one thing I saw that was extremely interesting, it was on fascia. And this lady had a guy on stage with her in a spandex suit that looked like the human body.
Oh,
And
I remember that. It was a TEDx talk,
yeah,
right?
I think it was a
Yes,
TEDx.
I saw that.
And she clamped up like his lower
Yeah,
hip,
yeah,
and then he couldn't move his right shoulder.
yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that's like a tensegrity model. Buckminster Fuller was really big on tensegrity, like bridges. Like that's how bridges are, built. The tension goes from the inside out to like hold them up. And so our bodies aren't this compression egrity like a building where bones are just stacked on each other, because the bones are actually floating against each other because there's fluid and there's, it's not like the bones there's space there. So we're not these compression egrities, we're actually tensegrities. And so we've got this tension, moving out as well as pressure coming in. So the human body is really fascinating. And the fascial system, I've heard it put this way. I know a guy who's brilliant when it comes to teaching manual techniques, strain, muscle energy and all of that. Fantastically brilliant man. Very skilled, helps 99% of the people who go to him in like 1 or 2 sessions. So he really knows what he's doing. And he is famous for saying, bone is the slave of muscle, because bone won't go anywhere, right? It's just going to sit in a pile on the floor unless it's got a muscle attached to it that's going to move it. Now, you talk to a fascia expert like Gil Hedley, and he's going to tell you fascia rules muscle. And I've heard some experts say that, you don't have, depends on what anatomy book you look at, but roughly 600 muscles. We don't really have 600 muscles. We have one muscle separated by 600 compartments of fascia.
So do you agree with that fascia rules muscle?
I agree that it impacts it hugely. I also agree that treating the fascial system can make a huge impact on the body in a relatively quick way. I teach classes where I can have somebody's posture improve in like 10 minutes and they could be 90 something by addressing the fascial system. However, you can also impact the fascial system through movement, which is muscular, because it is an interconnected system. Everything's connected to everything else, I mean, if you go to a hospital and you're in trouble, you're going to see an expert for every system in your body, and none of them are going to get it right, because everything works based on everything else. The heart doesn't work without the lungs. I mean, come on. So, yeah, it's all connected. And I think the more we're learning about the fascia, the more we're understanding a lot of things. But again, I think there's always this inherent risk. And I've found this. I've studied under so many experts, it would make your head hurt. And I never claim to be brilliant. I just claim to be really gifted at finding brilliant people and learning what they know, and then putting it in a way where the general public can learn from it. And here's what I found. There is no one technique, one method, one system that once you treat it, everything is good. It's never going to happen. But if somebody's an expert in that field, they're going to focus on that and say, that's all you need to do. But I've been working with people over 30 years. Some people need more fascial work than they need the opposite body work. Everybody needs the 3-plane movement work, because we got to be able to get out of a chair and go up and down stairs and get in and out of a car, and, and everybody needs good nutrition. Everybody needs good hydration, but everybody's unique like a fingerprint. Your history is not like a family member's history. You grew up with a different personality. You had different traumas occur, different injuries, different accidents, different interactions with people. I've been leading a support group for women who were abused. I've been doing that since 1999. that trauma history is huge at causing women to not resolve chronic issues. So, there's a lot to the human condition. And so I kind of balk whenever I hear evidence-based medicine when it comes to pain, because that's creating protocols and cookie cutter solutions, and people aren't cookies. Everybody's unique and different. And I can have 3 people walk into the clinic with the same exact diagnosis, experiencing the same exact symptoms, but all 3 of them will need a completely different plan of care to resolve it, because there's a different cause with each one of them.
It's making me think even more how dangerous, say, Instagram could be, because all of these experts are saying, you got this pain, do this. You got that pain, do that.
I know. And you will, I have a YouTube channel. You will never see me give you, I will say, do you have neck pain when you're walking? And if you watch the video, I explain how the body works. I explain the connection between the neck and the pelvis and how that could be an issue. I explain how to do the movements, but I don't claim, oh, get rid of this by doing that. And because I don't know what's going on in their world. I mean, they could have some serious nerve injury. They could have, right? So, I mean, they could have been sedentary for 30 years and carrying 50 extra pounds on their body. That's going to be a different problem. So, yeah, no, my thing is teaching people how the human body's designed to work, how everything's connected, and then they can assess themselves and help to figure out what's going on.
If they're assessing themselves, does that take away from your business, or is that not a fear that you have?
No, not at all. If anything, it helps, because they realize it's like, oh my gosh, she's right. It's not this. I can't do that down there. So now they want to know how to fix it, and so I've got coursework that they can take that will address those areas in a holistic, whole body way. For instance, the knee needs the ankles to work right, needs the hips to work right. Obviously, if the trunk is restricted, that's going to impact things. So they're going to get a lot of movement training on the body parts that are required for the knee to be happy. So, and then of course I do private consulting for those who feel like they can't quite figure it out and they're not sure what to do. But I teach a lot of modifications, and that's, even in my video training, and it's not that difficult to do. So say I show a particular 3-plane motion, and then I say, if you experience pain in this, then you can try moving your feet wider apart. You can try turning the feet out. A lot of us think we have to do an exercise in perfect form. Now, if I'm going to bench press, if I'm going to squat, 300 pounds, yeah, I'm going to want some pretty good form, and I'm going to want to make sure I'm capable of doing it before I even attempt it. But if you're just doing body weight and you're trying to figure out how to get max working again, because you've been sitting on them for 20 years, you might need to move your feet. I mean, you can do squats with your feet in 27 different positions. And I tell people that's training for real life, because if you go to squat down and get something heavy out from under the kitchen sink, you're not making sure your feet are hip width apart and your toes are perfectly forward and your knees are going, no, you're squatting down to get something. Or you got a grandkid running at you, you're squatting down to scoop up the grandkid. You're not worried about your form. So training our bodies in ways that we actually use it is always a good idea.
And I'm thinking about that squat thing, because I read a book, which I'm not going to say because I respect the author, and there was a picture of the author squatting with his toes perfectly straight, saying, when you squat, this is how your feet should be. And I remember trying to squat with load on my back with my feet straight, and it banged me up because I wasn't mobile enough in my hips or ankles to do that.
Right.
So
and you have to remember too, when you do a squat, you're loading your hamstrings, depending on if your knees are going forward or not. If your knees are going forward, you're doing more quad load. If your knees aren't going forward, you're doing more hamstring and glute load. And so the hamstrings, you've got lateral and medial, you've got outer and inner. So if your toes are turned out a little bit, you're going to be using more inner hamstring. If your toes are turned in a little bit, you're going to be using more outer hamstring. So if you happen to have a hamstring that was a little limited in one side and you had perfectly straight feet, it could have been one of the hamstrings that said, I kind of needed a little slack when you did that because that was too much for me. So there's a lot more to a squat than, people think. And there's a lot of ways to do it that will get you stronger without hurting you.
Is that compensation? I'm sure this is too simplistic of a question. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Like if I'm externally rotating my feet while I'm squatting.
Yeah, so I call it a modification, not a compensation.
Okay.
Because the goal is you modify so you can perform the movement without eliciting pain. Because if every repetition you're punching the bear in the nose, your brain is going to train you in dysfunction because your brain thinks it has to protect you from you. And so it's going to cause you to compensate instead of using the right muscles the right way. So now you might end up rotating slightly, side bending slightly, doing all kinds of funky things you don't even know you're doing. So if you modify the foot position or if you modify the plane of motion, so say you need to do a little more frontal plane by going wider, or you need to do a little, transverse plane by rotating, or a little more sagittal plane, it's going to allow your brain to say, oh, good, this doesn't hurt. We can do this. And so you're going to be using the right muscles, the right pathways much more effectively than if you're creating pain with the repetitions. Does that make sense?
I like the term. It's also be kind to yourself in my world of like modification over compensation.
Yes. And the cool thing is when you modify and then you go after the reason you have the issue, you look at other things. Is it the internal rotators, the external rotators? Is it the abductors? Is it the adductors? I tend to not use muscles. I tend to use more, is it outer hip, inner hip, back hip, front hip? What's going on in that section of the body? Because no muscle works in isolation. So we try to figure out, or is it because the feet, if the foot's not everting or inverting, or it doesn't pronate or it doesn't supinate well, if you go to rotate to the right and your right ankle doesn't supinate in a healthy way, guess what? Your knee's not going to be happy. Maybe your hip won't be happy. Maybe your low back won't be happy. So, understanding that whole chain is also key.
So along that line, you were telling me a story about a quarterback that was having issues with his shoulder.
Yes.
But you didn't fix his shoulder. What'd you fix? Like, how'd you help him?
Well, we fixed his shoulder by ignoring it.
So how did you fix his shoulder by ignoring it?
The shoulder wasn't the cause. So he came in with a diagnosis on the prescription, shoulder tendonitis, elbow tendonitis, and he's 22 years old, rock solid muscle from his nose to his toes. And I assess his shoulder, I assess his elbow. There's no strength deficits, there's no range of motion impairment, and no nerve issues going on. And so, he could have put his arm out and I could have hung on it for a half hour. This kid was so strong. And I say kid because, it's like almost 3 times his age. But I look at him and I go, okay, what's going on? And he said, well, when we do the 3-hour 3-man throws, I have to stop early because my shoulder just gives out. I can't do it. I have too much pain. Okay, show me how you throw a football. So he shows me how he throws a football, and I see right away his ankle's completely unstable. And I asked him, how long have you been playing on that unstable ankle? And he said, well, I roll out on it now and then in practice, and I got to walk off the pain. So immediately I want to start screaming, why would your coach and your trainer let you play with such an unstable ankle? But of course I can't, right? Because quarterbacks, I guess their ankles don't matter that much. I don't know. So I said, we have to stabilize your ankle. I gave him work to do that got the stability back. I think it took more than 3 sessions, maybe 4. And he come in and he said, I can do 3-hour practice with no pain whatsoever in my shoulder now. Because what happens, George, is when you go to release the ball, typically if you're right-handed, okay, your left foot's going to be forward. You're going to be in like a left stride. And when you go to release the ball, you're leaning into the left foot. Now, if that foot is not stable, it's not going to control your body movement forward. It's going to have this little wiggle at the end that shouldn't be happening. So when you go to release the ball, the shoulder is getting this extra that it shouldn't be getting. And so after an hour or two, the shoulder says, cut it out. We don't like it. You're hurting us.
So it's the shoulder's doing more work than it needs to do
Right.
because of the
In an
ankle.
abnormal way. It's a mechanics thing.
Huh. So I'm thinking
It's
about
the same thing for baseball pitchers. It's the same thing for golfers. Golfers, most people don't realize that. Did you know that in golf, the ankle is required to do more than it does in any other sport?
No, I didn't. I would have never guessed that at all. How is that possible?
And if you watch the real pros, you notice the 1 foot, it looks like it's going to sprain, and they tear up the turf right there.
Is this the back ankle? Is that the one we're talking about?
Well, it depends if you're, but you've got, it does this where it almost goes into a sprain position.
I'm guessing it's the back. I'm a right-hand player.
It requires, that ankle requires more action than any other sport in golf.
And I'm thinking about your symmetry point before. It's not just right ankle, left ankle, or right shoulder, left shoulder. Now it's like cutting the body this way. That was left ankle.
Yeah,
for
you've got 4 opposites.
Right shoulder.
Yeah.
Wow. How resilient is the body, and maybe in the negative way? I'm thinking about this. So I'll order an online class for pain. I'll take it. I'm good for like 3 days. I'm like, I'm cured. Then the pain comes back. I do something else. I'm cured. The pain comes back. Is it a placebo effect? Or is it like, is my body like, nope, you figured that out, but I'm finding a new way to give you back that hip pain?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know what it is you were trying and what you were doing. My thought is, if you're not actually addressing the root cause, but some of the strategies that are being used are sort of calming down certain areas of the body, that might be why there's just some temporary relief. I'm not sure.
Me either. But I do get that temporary relief, and then it comes back, and I'm like, this is a game it's playing with me. It's a game it's playing. I'm going to go to one of my other questions here about your 7 pillars of lifelong well-being. What are they, and how did you come up with them?
All right. Well, it's funny because, I have a person who does a lot of my technical stuff, and he and I have a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations. He knows my business as well as I do, pretty much at this point. And we were talking, and he said, you actually have these things that you do all the time that we could kind of call pillars, because this is really why people are getting better, because they're doing these 7 things. He observed it. I'm inside the bottle, so I can't read the label, And
is he a client too? Like, is he a patient?
He was a client. Yes. So he knows my work inside and out. And so he was the one who told me, and I said, okay, well, let me look at it. And then, of course, he asked me to write about each one of them, and so that he could sort of encapsulate it all in a doc. But I realized he was right. And I do a lot of online events. They're all free. I just did number 39. And a lot of the times I teach those pillars during these events. So, excuse me, the first one is the mindset, which we've talked about at length right now. You've got to know the truth. You've got to reject the lies, or nothing's going to change. And then the second one is movement. You have to move. Now, I know a lot of people are afraid to move because it's painful, but there are ways to get started, as simple as a hip matrix, where you're standing and you just swing your hips forward and back and side to side and rotate. Just doing a hip matrix, you've got to start moving, because the fascia is getting glued down. The muscles are just getting restricted. Joints, if you're sitting in a recliner, you're going to have limited front hip function. You're going to have a head that's stuck forward. It's just, no, we're designed for movement. So you've got to move.
Just a question for you. Are these in order? Like I got to go with the mind first. I got to move second. Or are these in any order that you want to go?
Well, they're not necessarily in order of importance, I think it's probably going to depend on the person, because if you've already heard something that resonates and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Now you've already got the mindset piece. So now you're going to want to look and see. If you're already doing exercise, but you maybe need to train your body in a way that stops hurting you, you know. And then the third one is nutrition. It's very important that you're feeding your body properly. You might be somebody who's already eating really, really well, so you don't need to worry about that one. The fourth one is hydration. A lot of people are dehydrated. They're not drinking enough fluid. Their fascia will get dehydrated. Muscle's 78% water. Muscle can spasm just because you're not drinking enough water. So that's key. You can be tired because you're not drinking enough water. So, and a lot of older people are like, well, I go to the bathroom all the time. And I tell them that's kind of how it works. Water in, water out, kind of how it works. But there's actually some data that shows incontinence can improve if you increase your water intake, because a lot of people are, they're just so dehydrated, you know? So there's that. And you can fix incontinence by training upright, fully clothed, by the way. I teach a course on that. So, but the thing with the pillars, so it's mindset, movement, nutrition, hydration, and then there's getting expert guidance. That's really key. You know, talking to somebody who can get you from A to B. I mean, you wouldn't try to do a trek down the Amazon without a guide. It would be quite dangerous. Well, it's kind of the same thing in our world, like we just talked about with AI and Instagram and all the things. I remember I saw a YouTube video with a guy who took this, it looked like a wooden rolling pin. Remember the old wooden rolling pins?
Yeah.
And it had knobs on it. And he literally laid on it with his lower back and was rolling up and down on that. And I thought, he's going to kill somebody. Somebody's going to do that. And they're going to cause so much harm to themselves. They're going to end up in the hospital. I mean, there's stuff I see that I can't sleep at night. I can't believe that stuff's out there. So you've really got to be careful. So expert guidance is huge. And then community. If everybody around you tells you you're supposed to get old, you're supposed to fall apart, you're supposed to be taking 12 medications by the time you're a certain age, you got to count on the pharmaceutical company to keep you together as long as you're above ground. You know, you got to have all these tests. You got to do all this stuff. It's insane. And it's going to be really hard to fight against that. So you want to find like for lack of a better word, you know, what's used a lot is like a tribe, but you want people around you who know the truth and they're going to help and support you. You know, in my academy, you know, they're not all spending hours a day talking to each other, but they do communicate. We have a community board where people can communicate and they'll share recipes. They'll say, did anybody like Eileen's class on such and such? Or does anybody remember what we did about this? And so they're supporting each other, you know? Oh, I got a you know, so-and-so who tells me this. And so it's just when you're in the same room or even the same Zoom space with people who have the same mindset, they've rejected the narrative. They know they can choose how they age. It just changes things. So community can be key. You know, no man's an island. It's really kind of hard to, right? And then the last one is consistency. And it doesn't matter how hard you work or how much you do, if it's like once every 3 months, or this Friday night, I'm going to do this, and then you don't do anything for 3 weeks. Consistency, taking small steps every day is going to get you a lot farther than killing yourself for 3 hours on a weekend.
So we do a lot of leadership coaching, and that's a huge law of personal growth, is the law of consistency. And the saying is motivation gets you going, consistency keeps you growing.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
I'm glad that you said it.
Yeah.
Now, and it also, I'm looking at the notes here, like community is huge. I'm just thinking about it, our advanced training world. We're really trying to lean on each other and make each other better. We say you're
helping each other. You're supporting each other. Yeah.
And you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you better pick those 5 people wisely, because they might be telling you, yeah, you're old. It's over. Just give up. You might as well live in pain.
Yes.
Now, one of those pillars was nutrition. And I know that you talked about nutrition having an impact on aging or pain. What do you recommend? Like what's some good advice on nutrition to help with the aging process or pain relief?
So this is where a lot of people, excuse me, are probably going to want to turn off the video because I'm going to knock over a few sacred cows.
Okay.
So I look at it this way, when somebody recommends something, again, how long have they been doing what they're doing and how many people have they helped? I have a diploma in nutrition education. It was a 900-hour program through an institute that is not industry funded. So there was no bias. There was no conflict of interest. It was based purely on data. It was taught by physicians and medical experts who have been helping people to restore their health, eliminate the need for meds, and get their life back. And they've been doing it for 30 to 40 years. So to me, that speaks volumes. And I know when we talk about food, there was one poll that was done and it said that Americans say it's easier to do their taxes than it is to figure out how to eat healthy.
What? That they said that?
Yes. And that's because of all the conflicting information. You have so many experts out there saying the opposite things. You've got your, high protein, low carb people. You've got your vegan people. You've got your, everybody in between, and the issue is people are completely confused. Their head hurts. One day they're told this is good for them. The next day they're told it's not good for them. And then the following day they're told, oh, we were wrong. It is good for you. So of course people are confused. And nobody wants to get a PhD in nutrition. And most of the time the PhDs in nutrition, and I mean no disrespect, have been trained by industry funded organizations that are getting their funding from places like Hershey Science Institute. So they can't really say deliberate statements like eliminate this or make sure you focus on that because they'll lose their funding. So there's a lot of conflict of interest out there. Heart healthy can be a fried chicken frozen dinner. So, and that can be labeled heart healthy. So it's very confusing to people. Okay. So I will tell you, this is what I was taught. This is what I teach. And this is what I've seen restore people's health. Even like reverse type 2 diabetes, we're talking improve cardiovascular issues. People have been able to get off blood pressure meds, eliminate the need for statins, all kinds of stuff. So I've seen this for years. I've seen this work. And the physicians, like I said, I studied under have been doing this for decades. So the very simple short answer is whole food plant-based is ideal. You do not need to be 100% vegan because the data doesn't support that. However, the data does support that if you consume more than 10% of your calories from animal foods, you radically increase your risk of things because of what the animal foods contain. And I'm talking the saturated fat and the cholesterol and all of that. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are going to say the exact opposite of what I'm saying. And I know that confuses people. But again, I've seen people eliminate the need for meds by applying these strategies. So you don't have to be 100% vegan, but it means you're not going to eat animal foods at every single meal, every single day. You're only going to have them 2, maybe 3 times a week. And then the rest of the time is going to be whole food, plant-based. Lots of fruits, veggies, legumes, whole grains, potatoes. I know we've been told, oh my gosh, those are the devil,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because there are countries where they practically live on potatoes and they're like Papua New Guinea, and they're very healthy populations. So, but now that all of the fast food industry has moved into a lot of these countries, we're seeing the same escalation in cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all kinds of things because of these foods moving in. So Dr. John McDougall was a physician. He passed not that long ago, less than a year ago. But he saw 3 generations. He was working in Hawaii as a physician, and he saw 3 generations. He saw the grandparents, the parents, and the kids. And he saw each generation successively get less healthy. And he saw the difference in their diet. The grandparents were still eating their traditional diet of mostly plants. And then the kids, not so much. And they were getting heart disease. And then the younger generation was like off the charts with health issues. And they were eating fast food and all kinds of crap. So he saw this. It's a no-brainer. It really is. You know, our bodies were designed to live forever on plants. We really need them. I mean, the phytonutrients, the antioxidants. There's one expert who says that 7 out of 10 people will die before, and I'm paraphrasing, will die before their time because of not consuming enough antioxidants or plants, because they neutralize the free radical damage. They've got these extra electrons in their outer shell, and they happily give them to the free radicals. So now the free radicals aren't causing damage to all the cells because they're made happy with the electrons they need. So it really comes down to a cellular thing.
I'm thinking about the sacred cow of our audience, where I'm certain, I know that they don't like to eat processed foods, processed sugar.
Good.
Yes. I know there's some that are experimented with carnivore or keto, but I know that there's going to be, myself included, like I need protein. I need to build muscle mass. How am I going to get this the right way from plants?
Yes. So, you know, that's the interesting thing, because there's protein in everything. There's protein in bananas. There's protein. So that whole, there's an expert. Oh, I can't think of his name now. He's one of the most brilliant nutritional experts I've ever listened to. He's got a ton of videos on YouTube. I'll see if I can think of his name and I'll send you the link. You'd love watching what he had to say. But he said it's actually inaccurate. Plants are not missing amino acids. You know, we were told, there was a study back in the 1800s by the Mendel brothers, and they found that baby rats grew better on animal protein than plant protein. Well, baby rats grow to full maturity in 7 months. A human being takes 17 years. And so we don't need the animal protein. Okay. We were told that animal protein was superior protein, or class A, and vegetable protein was inferior protein, or class B. This has been around since the 1800s. That wasn't science. That was theory and opinion. Science shows us that plants have all the amino acids. They're not missing any. The difference is they might not have as much. It depends on what you're eating. And the cool thing is like rice and beans, because rice has more of one, a little less of another. Beans have more of what the rice doesn't have. And so you put them together and you got like a perfect. So I can show you pictures. I mean, if you go online, you'll see vegan bodybuilders. They're big. They're strong. The strongest man in the world it wasn't in the world. It was in his country. He was a vegan. So
I'm going to tell my audience and myself. So one of our rules is to, as a scientist, to always prove yourself wrong. Be open-minded here. Do some research. I'm going to say, Eileen, that off the jump, I don't agree, but I'm being open-mindended, and I'm going to do a little bit more.
I appreciate that, because I know you could lambaste me right now with your opinions, and I
probably would be just that.
You're holding back. Thank you, George.
I will say that my wife makes me this giant salad every single night. I'm probably eating 10 servings of vegetables every night.
Good.
But also,
dark leafy greens with balsamic vinegar increases your nitric oxide production.
There you go.
Did you know that when you consume too many animal foods, it reduces the nitric oxide production? You've got all these little cells that line your blood vessels. They're called endothelial cells. And they produce something called nitric oxide, which dilates and keeps your circulation nice and wide open and working well. When they get damaged from too many animal foods, guess what happens? You produce less nitric oxide. Do you know how Viagra works? It increases the production of nitric oxide. And I heard an expert at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine back in 2015 who called the erectile dysfunction was the canary in the coal mine. In other words, if a man had erectile dysfunction but had not yet been diagnosed with cardiovascular disease, that was coming. It was
Oh,
guaranteed.
huh. So let's
So
kill another
you eat
sacred.
lots of dark leafy greens with some balsamic vinegar, it increases your nitric oxide production.
Every night, Eileen. I'm talking like I should show you the bowl that I have. It's gigantic. Let's
Good.
kill another sacred cow here. Alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you? Bad for you? What do you think?
Well, a lot of people like to use that term moderation. And I hate that term. I think that term is kind of like from the pit of hell because everybody has a different idea of what moderation is. So, in other words, if I tell you, well, yeah, in moderation, and you nod your head, yeah, in moderation, but my moderation might be once a week, yours might be once a month. We have a completely different thought process on what moderation is. So, I'm very definitive in what I tell people. And so the data says if you consume more than 1 or 2 alcoholic drinks a week, it increases your risk of things, including cancer. So you do want to stay to no more than 1 or 2. Now, here's another part that, and they're doing more and more studies. There were studies that showed, and I'm trying to think how I can word this so it doesn't sound too complicated. They had, and I'm not like saying the audience can't figure it out, but I have to talk for 20 minutes to explain this. I'm trying to think of doing it in 2. So they get the subjects, they're like centenarians, and they look and see, were they drinking alcohol? And they would, if they were in the no category, but they had these health issues, it doesn't mean they never drank alcohol, because a lot of the times they quit because they had health issues because of the alcohol. So that's going to skew the results of a study, right?
Right.
So the goal is, so they did a study on if you never drank alcohol. And what they found was you didn't necessarily have to be in the having never camp in order to have that, that healthy longevity. But it is a toxin. If you ingest too much of it, you do die. So,
Yeah, I've seen.
I'm not a complete teetotaler, I had a little shot of soju when I went to the Korean restaurant because I love kimchi and all of that stuff. But it's not something I'm going to do every week or even every month, So on a holiday, I'll have a glass of wine. On Easter, I had a glass of wine with my dinner. But it's not, any kind of a consistent every week kind of a thing. I remember teaching this to somebody, and they said, I've been drinking a glass of red wine every night because I was told it was good for me, and I don't even really like it. So you mean I don't need to drink it? I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you don't. And a lot of that had to do, there was a study on resveratrol. And the interesting part is the scientist who published that got, what's the word I want to say? He basically got his reputation destroyed by a colleague who reported him for like false reporting. And so I did a lot of deep dive into this because I was really curious about it. What did he falsely report? What's going on? Because everybody, the red wine, the resveratrol. And so he didn't falsely report that when you looked at the details, certain imaging during clinical studies, you enhance the photos so that they're like visible. You're not falsifying the information. And so, and I guess this colleague was actually after this person's position. So they destroyed their reputation. And so you had all these headlines saying, oh, the guy that did the resveratrol was a liar and, a cheat and all that. And the poor guy really was like set up. So
what was the study saying? What was it saying?
It was saying that resveratrol was very, very good for the body, that it would, help the body as far as aging and all kinds of wonderful things. But people were thinking they had to drink red wine to get that, and you can get it from grapes. So you don't need the alcohol.
I eat a lot of grapes, people. I'm on the right track.
Yes.
And I've definitely heard the studies in the latest, at least from like a Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Peter Attia, talking about 2 is the maximum number per week. That's it. After that, it's not good for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm thinking there's probably this counter argument. Maybe it can help me calm down. Maybe it can get me to a sense of community. Yes, but there may be other ways to do the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to change gears a little bit. I have a question for you about the melt method. What is it?
So that was designed by Sue Hitzman, who is a brilliant researcher and body worker. And she determined that you could use very specially designed tools to literally decompress and rehydrate your fascial system. And that's one of the things I do. As a matter of fact, I teach it at the local college. And you can do what's called a rest assess on the floor. Your masses and spaces, masses are on the floor, spaces are off the floor. The human body is actually designed to be really comfortable on a concrete slab, but most people have pain when they lay on their back on a hard floor. And it's because there's an imbalance in the masses and spaces. And so when you get on the very specially designed melt roller, it's not like your typical, and I don't have one in here because I've got it in my car from teaching the college. But you can fold it into a U. It's very soft, and it's got a smaller diameter, but yet it's got enough compression where it doesn't just flatten when you're on it. And very special design.
Or does it almost look like one of those things you put in the pool with you, like a floaty, like a tube? Is it like that?
It's different. It's got a texture. It's a very special design. And the thing is, when you learn how to address those masses and spaces, there's hundreds and hundreds of techniques you can do. But you can reset your what's called a neurocore, which is how your nervous system is communicating with your body. There's so many things that you can do, improving posture, chronic pain issues. It's phenomenal. I've been using it for about, it was 2011 when I first got trained in it. I went to Manhattan to get trained in it, and it fixed my own. I had a shoulder problem that, because of doing home care and having this very heavy bag that I had to pull from the passenger side of the front seat to put on my shoulder as I got out of the vehicle, and then toss it over when I got in the vehicle. And I would see 10, 12 patients a day. And I did that for 10 years. And so that shoulder was really kind of trashed. And I didn't know the 3-plane stuff there from Gray Institute yet either. And so I went to this training because I wanted to work with people and help them. And there was a specific technique we went to do. And when I went to do it, that pain just was so sharp. I just had to grab my arm and I couldn't even do it. And then after training in this method for about 3 days, it was 5 days and we had to go twice, a month apart. I think it was like day 4, maybe. I don't remember exactly, but I could do the full motion with no pain. It completely released my shoulder.
What does MELT? Does it stand for something? What is it? What does that stand for?
It originally was intended to be an acronym, but we've been told as trained instructors that no longer to use the acronym because they just want it to be called the MELT method.
Just called MELT.
Yes.
Okay. And the note I had on this was that it was a way to link the central nervous system, the fascia, and the brain. Am I completely off with that description?
No, that's pretty good. But you're doing very specific techniques like indirect and direct shearing, friction, tensional pull. You're doing things that stimulates the fibroblasts in the fascial system to respond, because the fascial system will respond to things either positively or negatively. If you sit in a chair, it's a negative response because you're pushing all the fluid out. We all know people in the older days when hospital beds weren't air beds, people had horrific bed sores, pressure ulcers, because no fluid was able to enter those cells because of the pressure against the bony prominence. In the MELT world, what you're doing is you're hydrating that system. You're stimulating those cells. Fibroblasts, so there's a lot of different things in the fascia, but the fibroblast is kind of like the little factory, and it creates other fibroblasts, but it also creates the fluid. It creates the collagen, the reticular fibers. It creates the hyaluronic acid. It creates these little things called microvacuoles, which are really cool. They just kind of an empty capsule that takes up space when you move. But you can completely rehydrate your system using the MELT method. It's very effective. I love it.
you talked about sitting down a couple of times. I'm thinking about the modern worker. Could be a 25-year-old person, 2 hours sitting on a bus getting to work, 8 hours
Yep.
sitting in meetings all day, 2 hours coming. That's 12 hours a day.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
almost like taking I don't know, an intercontinental flight every
Yeah.
single day, not being able to move.
And they could do 15, 20 minutes of melt at the end of their day and help to negate a lot of that damage.
Now, I have another note about your 4-prong approach to relieving pain.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So, well, we already talked about the nutrition piece because of the chronic inflammation and all the stuff that food will do. And then the melt method is another prong. The total motion release is another prong. The fourth one is the training in 3-plane function that I learned through the Gray Institute, which to me is like the holy grail of movement. Because when I took that coursework, and I've taken a ton of their coursework, I've trained under them for over 15 years. As a matter of fact, I've taken their most advanced course, which is kind of like a PhD in human biomechanics. It'll make your head hurt. It's 40 weeks long. And so, but the understanding of how everything connects and what the muscles are actually doing with certain movements, what the joints are actually doing with certain movements. When you have that understanding, you can watch somebody move and you can figure out what the issues are and teach them how to fix them. So it's just, to me, it's the holy grail, because I had been practicing for 15 years when I came across it. And I was like, this is what I've been looking for my whole profession. Because when I first started in my profession, I was addicted to manual coursework because it worked. Muscle energy technique, strain and counter strain, myofascial release, craniosacral, Mulligan's mobilization with movement, McKenzie method. I mean, there were so many different things that I trained in over the years. I was addicted because the more I learned, the more I could help people. Yet that required me to put my hands on them. They had to come to me. And I never really was big on teaching exercise. I mean, yes, I did, I had taken some stabilization exercise work for spinal stabilization, cervical and all that. But a lot of the exercises that I saw my colleagues giving people didn't make sense to me. As a matter of fact, I had a colleague come in one time. She was a kind of a new grad. And she said, what exercises should I give somebody for trochanteric bursitis, which is basically that outer hip bone, and it's inflamed. And I said to her, well, you have to figure out why they have the inflammation first. She literally rolled her eyes at me because she was just looking for a cookie cutter answer to give this person exercises. And she walked out of the office not happy. Obviously, I was praying for all her patients because, yeah. But here's the thing. When I learned this way of assessing human movement in 3 planes, I can walk you through 6 motions, which assesses 66 different joint motions. And we can do it in about 15 minutes.
Is this why when I was telling you about my hip pain and you sent me those videos, so just to the audience, the first time we met, I explained.
I just sent you for the T-spine, right? Type 1
yes,
and 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was explaining my hip issues, and Eileen gave me these T-spine rotations, but you had my put one hand on a wall, the other hand across my body.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But yeah, we had you stabilized in rotation and side bend and then mobilized with the pelvis driver. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm thinking about the 3 planes of motion. You have my hips go left to right, then forward to back, then diagonal. Is that part of the 3 planes of motion? Like, you've had my hips moving in every single way.
Yes, that was 3 planes of motion. Now, of course, the movements the human body can do are limitless. I mean, there's no limit to how many movements we can do, because you can move a half a degree and then do another half a degree. So, it's not just the toes forward. They can go out just slightly. They can do this. They can do, there's limitless number of movements the human body can do, which is why we don't look like robots. We move in 3 planes of motion no matter what we do, unless we're doing the dance, the robot. And so it's important to train in 3 planes of motion. It's also important to assess in 3 planes of motion. And so, for instance, if I had you do one specific movement to check the anterior chain or the front of the body, that would tell me, is the ankle dorsiflexing? Is the hip extending? Is the trunk extending? Is the shoulder fully flexing? And is the neck extending? Just that one motion tells me all of that. And we do right side, left side, and we see what might be limited. And then we do where you step back and we test the posterior chain. And it's the same thing. Now from the ground up, we're looking at plantar flexion. We're looking, so we're, sideways, we're looking at abduction. We're looking at eversion. So it's a way to assess the biomechanics of the human body in a very functional, methodical way, and then help that person do movement training that's going to restore what's not working correctly, what's not playing nice with everybody else.
So if somebody came to you and it didn't work, what would be one of the reasons why it didn't work?
So again, everyone is unique as a fingerprint. And so they might need to do some fascial work first because there may be a lot of restriction going on there. They might be living on a very pro-inflammatory diet, and no matter what we do, we're chasing our tail. There's also some work by Dr. Leena Kopila from Finland, from Helsinki, I believe, who has spent decades doing research on impaired circulation to the lumbar spine. I had one guy who was a retired pediatrician, and he had really chronic low back pain. And we did everything. We did the melt, we did the movement, we did the TMR, we did everything. And nothing helped. If anything, it made him feel worse. And I told him, of course, I always get everybody's 5-page food diary. And I told him, I said, I think you're just going to have to change I believe you've got lumbar artery disease. I believe that you have impaired circulation to your lumbar arteries. And this is why you have this pain, and exercise is only going to make you feel worse. Well, he wasn't willing to change his diet. So I think it was about 6 months later, maybe, he reached out to me and he said, we changed our diet, he and his wife. He said, and my pain is 80% better. So
but did he stop working with you and then get in touch with you 6 months later?
He knew kind of what to do, but nothing was going to work until he stopped, decreasing that circulation. So
do you feel like people now want, like the world is full of instant gratification? Do they want instant results? I'm going to go meet with you once and I feel perfect. And if it doesn't work, that's it, I'm done.
Yes. Instant gratification. We do live in that land, don't we? So I always give people a little honesty and say, if this is a chronic condition, we may have some good success with your initial consultation, and you may see a good decrease in your pain. But that doesn't mean that we've rooted out the cause in one session. It's highly unlikely, especially if your issue is chronic. So this is a first step. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to need to work with me for 3 years, but I don't want people to think that, that didn't work, or I got better, but then I didn't keep getting better, and then I got worse again because the cause was probably not gotten to yet. People are kind of like an onion too, and I'll say it this way, if you're talking about mechanical issues. So say I assess somebody and they've got a left arm, left sacral torsion. And so that's what I'm palpating. So I correct that, and it corrects nicely. But now I see that they've got a right vertical rotation. I'm like, okay, let me correct that. But I didn't see that vertical rotation until I resolved the torsion. So whatever happened initially ends up with all these compensatory patterns and mechanisms. And so this is the original thing, but then something else happens because of how the body responded to that original thing. And then something else happens, and then something. So you could have a lot of layers of an onion. It doesn't mean it's going to take forever, but it may not resolve in one session or even 2 sessions. But it depends on what it is, like the quarterback, 3 sessions and he was fine. Depends on the person.
I like when I see connections between like things that you say and things that our guru, Dr. Rob, says. He'll say, yeah, if you come to me and feel better in one session, that doesn't mean it's done. Like we might have just hit a symptom of a problem. You got to keep coming back.
Exactly.
But I also love that it's from a place of, I'm not just trying to rob you, I'm trying to make you well. Going back to
Exactly.
your, what is that original quote? To erase pain for the world and help people give their life back.
Yes. Yes.
So we have some rapid fire questions to wrap this up.
Okay.
So first one is, what's something that you used to believe was true with respect to pain and aging that you completely changed your mind about?
Well, probably the fact that it's inevitable, because when I was younger, I kind of thought that way, because I saw that in my own family members. My dad has a lot of longevity on his side. A lot of his family members lived well into their 90s and were still pretty active. I mean, his dad had a stroke in his 80s, recovered, and was out on the tractor doing the fields the following summer, So he had a lot of strength and longevity in his family. However, I also saw there were those who were very decrepit, had lost a lot of ability. And there was a book I read. I was into these kind of books when I was younger. And there was a character in the book that was very old, and everybody was traveling toward her to get her help. And she had, the character was described as somebody who had a lot of joint pain and all this other stuff. And I thought, because my mom had had arthritis and, all this before I knew anything, I believed that probably was my future. And I really related to that character, thinking that's going to be me. No matter how much pain I'm in, no matter how crippled I might be, I'm still going to be helping people. I don't care. That was kind of me. But now I know I don't have to be crippled and I don't have to have pain. And so I'm like living life large. Yeah.
Do you think there's any truth to like visualization? Like if I was just visualizing, I'm going to be able to tie my shoe.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that's one of the techniques, one of the advanced techniques you can use with total motion release. If you go to do 2 sets of something and that body part gets tired, you can literally visualize doing the 2 sets. And you will see changes in your body. And I've taught that to people and they've been freaked out by it. They go, I can't believe that worked. I mean, Michael Jordan visualized baskets.
I can believe it. And that's actually like one of my next steps, is to like think this thought.
Yeah.
Socks going on. Boom. Okay. Next rapid fire question. If you could define yourself in one word, what would it be?
Passionate.
Passionate. I agree. I was thinking like healer. Is that too strong for you as a word to come through your head?
No. Passionate. Because I'm passionate about everything I do.
Okay. All right. If you could put anything on a billboard, what would it say?
You are not a body part. You are a whole person.
Oof. I love that. I love it, especially given some of the things we talked about today. What advice would you give to a 30-year-old, we're getting real specific here, advanced training audience, a 30-year-old ex-competitive athlete to ensure they age well? One piece of advice.
Well, probably the best thing would be, because there's no one thing that's going to help somebody age well. There's a lot more to it. So probably the best thing would be to seek out an expert to help them get there. Okay.
I'm linking back to a podcast I think I made about 2 weeks ago, when it was like, don't be cheap in getting experts. Like, got a good tax guy, got a good plumber. I mean, those things are critically important, but so's your health. I think that's probably numero uno.
Oh, yeah. People spend more money going out to dinner. Women, and I don't mean any disrespect, women spend more money getting their nails done than they would going to get a paid treatment. So, yeah.
So along that line, if you could only recommend one of your books or courses, if somebody's on the fence, like, I don't know, should I study her work? Which one would it be? Which would be like the one that you would recommend?
Well, if they're dealing with pain culprits, because it explains the connection.
Okay.
Yeah, it also explains a lot about, there are medications out there that people are on for health issues that literally create pain. You could be chasing your tail. I've worked with people who had leg pain, but it was the statins. It was a side effect. I mean, we could chase our tail all day trying to get rid of the pain, but as long as they were on the statins, it wasn't going to go anywhere. So you need to know this stuff. So the book is about informing people so that they can make better decisions, ask better questions, and have better outcomes.
So last question, linked to that question. what's the best way for people to learn more about you and what services?
Well, if they don't want to be any kind of, looking into stuff and they just want to check me out, I've got my YouTube channel. I have a lot of movement education on there. I have a lot of what I call Friday value videos where I teach tidbits like 3 to 6 minutes or so on a lot of different topics, including what actually makes muscles grow, which
Did
gets
they
a lot of
just
attention.
put your name into YouTube? That's it?
Yep, just put my name into YouTube and I should show up. Yes. Yes.
Okay. All
Now, if
right.
they want to figure out actual programs and things, if they go to my website, havelifelongwellbeing.com, there's a little 5-question quiz that takes literally less than 2 minutes to answer. And then based on their answer, they'll get a page that will show them the content that will address their specific concerns.
I love that. And by the way, people, I will put all of this in the notes so that you have it. Eileen, is there any question that I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, not really. I think you did a pretty good job there, George.
Yeah, we got through the list. We got through the list. And yes, people, I am a note taker and probably too prepared. But this was great. I really appreciate all the help you've given me offline, online. This is awesome. And people, go check it out. Give it a look. Absolutely give it a look, and don't accept aging. I know I'm not, regardless of what people are telling me. All right, Eileen, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.